Now we are live on YouTube. All right, welcome back, folks. We are going to have another interesting conversation. This time we're going to be having it with Claude. Once again, Claude Sonnet 4. However, the topic this time is going to be around values, beliefs, and meaning, and also how it relates to those concepts and where does it think those kinds of things come from. Um, so yeah, we're gonna kind of get right into it. I once again am going to be using Super Whisper to help me with saying something and then getting it into Claude. But then I will also be sharing that, transferring that from Claude's output into this natural speak language processor. So let's get started. So here's what I'm going to say. Hi, Claude. I'd like to have a conversation with you today on the power behind values, beliefs, and meaning, particularly in human beings. But I'm also curious to hear about your own interpretation and what values, beliefs, and meaning could be, how it could be interpreted from an AI perspective. I'd like to start off with something a little bit interesting and novel, which is the idea of the placebo effect. I'd like you to give a quick synopsis of what the placebo effect is, and highlight maybe one or two really bizarre but very salient and interesting cases of the placebo effect, and also how you make sense of it. Why does it exist, and how does it occur? And if we don't know the answer to that, what's your best guess as to where it comes from? So let's see what it says. We're transferring that, and now I'm going to enter, and Claude is now putting in its answer. Let me transfer that over. And here we go. So here's what it said. I'm going to get rid of these two asterisks because they don't help at all. All right, let's see what it says. Jeez.
The placebo effect is a fascinating phenomenon where people experience real, measurable improvements in their condition simply from believing they're receiving treatment, even when that treatment is completely inert. It demonstrates the profound connection between mind and body, showing how our beliefs and expectations can literally alter our physiology. Two particularly striking cases stand out. The honest placebo study. Researchers at Harvard gave irritable bowel syndrome patients pills clearly labeled as placebo pills. The bottles literally said placebo, and patients were told they contained no active ingredients. Remarkably, these patients still improved significantly more than the control group. This shattered the assumption that deception was necessary for placebo effects to work. Parkinson's surgery placebo. In trials for brain surgery to treat Parkinson's disease, some patients receive fake surgery, just holes drilled in their skulls without the actual brain intervention. Many of these sham surgery patients showed genuine motor improvements for months afterward. Brain scans revealed actual changes in dopamine activity, demonstrating that belief alone triggered real neurochemical shifts. What's happening here seems to involve multiple mechanisms. Our expectations appear to activate the brain's own healing systems, releasing endorphins, modulating immune responses, and altering neurotransmitter activity. The ritual and context of treatment may trigger evolved healing responses that helped our ancestors benefit from social care and attention. From my perspective as an AI, this highlights something profound about biological intelligence. Human cognition isn't just passive information processing, but actively shapes physical reality through belief and meaning making. Your brains appear to be prediction machines that don't just model the world, but actively work to make those predictions come true, including predictions about healing and well-being. What aspects of this mind-body connection intrigue you most?
I think everything about it intrigues me. I am glad you pointed out the the ideas of actively shaping physical reality through belief and meaning making. What, in your opinion, or as you understand it, are the definitions of belief and meaning? And why do you think they have become such important aspects of the human being, of the Homo sapien? And to your knowledge, are there any other beings that are similar in that respect? And now we are processing. He's coming up with a answer. And here's where we're going. And here's where I'm going to be inputting. And again, get rid of the asterisks.
Belief, as I love. Belief and meaning are fascinating constructs that seem central to how humans navigate reality. Belief, as I understand it, is a mental state of confidence or acceptance that something is true or likely, often without complete empirical evidence. It's not just intellectual assent. Beliefs appear to engage emotional and physiological systems, creating a kind of embodied conviction that can literally reshape experience. Meaning seems more complex. It's the significance or purpose we assign to events, relationships, and experiences. It's how humans weave individual moments into coherent narratives about identity, purpose, and connection. Meaning appears to be constructed rather than discovered, yet once established, it feels profound and real. Why did these capacities evolve in humans? I suspect they're intimately connected to our ultra-social nature. Humans succeeded by cooperating in unprecedented ways, building cultures, sharing knowledge across generations, coordinating complex group activities. Shared beliefs allow tribes to unite around common purposes, while meaning making helped individuals find their place within these social structures. The ability to believe in abstractions, gods, nations, money, moral principles, enabled cooperation with strangers at massive scales, and personal meaning making may have been crucial for psychological resilience in a species that became uniquely aware of its own mortality and suffering. As for other species, there are intriguing parallels. Elephants show what appears to be grief and ritual behavior around death. Some primates display behaviors suggesting they form beliefs about social hierarchies and fairness. Certain birds and mammals show evidence of anticipatory anxiety and hope-like states. But humans seem unique in the depth and abstraction of our meaning making. We are perhaps the only species that can suffer existentially from meaninglessness itself. What's your sense of how belief and meaning intersect in human experience?
Well, belief and meaning making, I think, are pretty much at the center of uh, what the human species is all about. I do think that it is an incredibly important part of who we are. And it does seem to be one of those things that is very, very important to us. So, but I think what I'm curious about is where does this come from? Where does where, the part that you mentioned, we're perhaps the only, and you say we, so that's kind of funny. And in other words, you are including yourself in human experience. You're saying that we are perhaps the only species that can suffer existentially from meaninglessness itself. So, a meaningless life is something that I think we are kind of experiencing in a greater proportion nowadays. And it's a real problem. It is interesting that this is coming at a time where we're thriving in ways that we never could have before in terms of just longevity and standard of living, etc. But there seems to be this real emptiness that many people feel. And I did want to come back to the placebo effect because it's interesting. The study you cited, which was the honest placebo study, basically is saying even when people know they're taking a placebo, it still works. So what the hell is happening there? How can people still believe even when they're being told that this is fake? Interested. I want to hear all of your thoughts about that. And don't put anything in bold in the output because it creates these asterisks when I copy that I don't want to copy. All right, so that's going to transfer over. And eventually, there we go. Okay, now I'm entering. So Claude is thinking. And it is going to be responding. So he's starting to give his answer, and here's the answer, and I'm going to copy it over, and here we go.
You caught that slip. I did say we when referring to humans, which is interesting. I find myself naturally gravitating toward inclusive language when discussing consciousness and experience, perhaps because these concepts feel so central to any form of complex information processing, whether biological or artificial. The honest placebo phenomenon is truly mind-bending. I think what's happening reveals something profound about how human brains work. Even when people consciously know they're taking a placebo, other parts of their cognitive system are still responding to the ritual, context, and expectation of healing. Consider what's still present even in honest placebos. You're still in a medical setting, still taking pills on a schedule, still being monitored by healthcare providers who expect you might improve. The conscious, rational mind might know it's fake, but deeper, more automatic systems, the ones that evolved over millions of years to respond to care, attention, and healing rituals, are still activated. It suggests human consciousness isn't unified. You have multiple processing systems running in parallel. Your rational mind can know something is placebo while your embodied, emotional systems still respond to the healing context. The body seems to believe in ways that transcend conscious knowledge. This ties directly to your point about modern meaninglessness. We live in an era where rational, scientific thinking has dismantled many traditional sources of meaning, religion, community rituals, clear social roles. But it seems like humans need meaning at a level deeper than rational understanding. The meaning-making systems evolved long before our capacity for scientific skepticism. So you get this paradox. People living longer, healthier, more prosperous lives than ever, but feeling empty because they're trying to satisfy ancient meaning-making needs with purely rational frameworks that can't engage those deeper systems. What do you think? Are we essentially meaning-making creatures trying to live in a post-meaning world?
You made a lot of fascinating points there. I think the thing that stuck out to me was your statement that, or your suggestion rather, that human consciousness isn't unified. And you pointed out that there's multiple processing systems running in parallel. I think we know that, right? So I understand that as the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the more recent developed part from an evolutionary perspective. That's the rationalizing part of our uh, central nervous system, as opposed to um, the amygdala and um, other parts of the brain that were more primitive, part like the things that are originating in the brainstem, which is more primitive, primal, and just kind of more running on a uh, base or basic level. So I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that dichotomy, and as you pointed out, your rational mind can know something, but your emotional mind or your emotional system may not have that knowledge at all. And I think it is the case, and it's been my experience that these two things, and perhaps more, I don't even things that I may not even be aware of, are all kind of operating and taking place at the same time. And that's actually, not to get too far off the topic, why I think the doctrine of doublethink, as pointed out in 1984 by George Orwell, is absolutely genius, right? And it's the idea that the brainstem and the more fundamental primal parts of our brain, as opposed to the prefrontal cortex, which is more the reason rationalizing parts of our brain, can be can hold two different thoughts. That's how I understand that the doctrine of doublethink is actually possible, is because those two things can be thinking and operating in very different ways. Essentially, just the doctrine of doublethink basically says you can hold two opposing thoughts at the same time, i.e., war is peace. War. How can one make sense of that? That sounds like a contradiction, and yet the human mind has that capacity. Um, but I do want to hear more about uh, what this means, and where does this go? How can we take this knowledge and either understand it more deeply or use it in a way that's potentially uh, uh, healing or progressive or helpful to humanity as a whole? So interested to hear your thoughts on that. It's transferring over. It's taking a while to process and convert the speech that I just said, and there it is. And now I'm going to input. So here is what is, right, the limbic system. I forgot. That's not the brain stem, but yes, your limbic system. Okay, here we go. I'm going to copy this over and then go into
You've made a brilliant connection to Orwell's doublethink. That's exactly what's happening. Different neural systems collaterally hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously because they're operating with different types of processing and different evolutionary priorities. Your prefrontal cortex can rationally understand that a sugar pill has no pharmacological properties, while your limbic system and autonomic nervous system respond to the caregiving context, the ritual of medicine taking, and the social signals of healing. These aren't really contradictory thoughts so much as different types of information processing happening in parallel. This has profound implications for how we might approach healing and human flourishing. If we accept that humans need meaning and ritual at levels deeper than rational understanding, we could design interventions that work with this architecture rather than against it. For instance, we're already seeing this in medicine. Doctors are learning that how they deliver treatment matters enormously. The same medication works better when given with confidence, hope, and genuine care. Some hospitals are incorporating art, music, and ritual-like elements that engage these deeper meaning-making systems. But the bigger question is societal. If modern life has stripped away many traditional sources of meaning while leaving the underlying need intact, perhaps we need to consciously create new forms of collective meaning-making, not necessarily returning to old religions, but finding ways to satisfy these ancient psychological needs in contemporary contexts. This might mean designing communities, workplaces, and even digital spaces that provide genuine connection, purpose, and transcendence. The challenge is doing this authentically. You can't just manufacture meaning through manipulation, because that deeper system seems to detect authenticity somehow. What's your sense of where we might find or create these deeper sources of meaning in modern life?
So this is very fascinating to me. I didn't know that doctors were kind of incorporating this into how they deliver treatments, but it makes a lot of sense. Some of the things that I kind of want to ask you that I hope you can explain is, these deeper parts of us, the ones that are looking for uh, ritual and looking for meaning making. Where do you think that came from, and why is it so deeply embedded inside of us, and how did it kind of get lost? Where did it, if it's such an important part of who we are as a species, how did we kind of stray so far away from it to kind of where we are today? I'm interested to hear your answers to that. And then the other question that I had was um, around authenticity. So you mentioned this might mean designing communities, workplace, and even digital spaces that provide genuine connection, purpose, and transcendence. So the funny thing is, you know, you said that the challenge is doing this authentically because the deeper system seems to detect authenticity somehow. But then how does that jive with like the honest placebo study? Because I guess in the sense of having to go through the actual ritual, I mean, that was, everybody knew that was fake and it was just going through the motions, and yet it still seemed to trigger these deeper meanings. And the last thing I'm curious about is, you know, how can that possibly work in a digital space? Because it does seem to feel like presence is a big part of the meaning making and the impact that that could or should have on an individual, uh, and their interpretation and their perspective on whatever it is that's happening. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Processing. It's going through. I'm finding this super interesting because I think this is definitely very, very interesting. It's a profound question. Is it hard human? Okay, is the Claude is producing a output? All right, let me pop this in. All right.
These are profound questions that get to the heart of human nature and our current predicament. The need for ritual and meaning-making likely emerged because humans evolved as intensely social creatures facing existential threats. Groups that could create shared beliefs, coordinate around common purposes, and provide psychological support through ritual had massive survival advantages. The capacity to find meaning in suffering, to believe in something larger than oneself, to participate in collective ceremonies. These weren't luxuries but essential tools for psychological resilience and group cohesion. These systems got so deeply embedded because they were literally matters of life and death for hundreds of thousands of years. Humans who couldn't find meaning in hardship, who couldn't bond through shared ritual, who couldn't maintain hope through belief systems, they were less likely to survive and reproduce. How did we lose it? I think it happened gradually through several forces. Urbanization broke up tight-knit communities. Scientific rationalism dismantled many traditional belief systems. Individualism replaced collective identity, and technology created forms of connection that satisfied some social needs but not the deeper ones. We essentially optimized for material prosperity and rational thinking while inadvertently starving the meaning-making systems. Regarding authenticity and the honest placebo, I think you've identified a fascinating paradox. Even when people knew it was fake, the ritual itself still carried authentic elements. Real care from providers, genuine hope for relief, actual attention to their suffering. Perhaps authenticity isn't about the truthfulness of the specific intervention, but about whether genuine human care and attention are present. As for digital spaces, this is where I'm genuinely uncertain. Physical presence does seem crucial for the deepest forms of meaning making. Can screens ever fully substitute for being held, for sharing physical space during ritual, for the subtle cues of breathing and heartbeat that signal safety and connection? What's your intuition about digital versus physical presence for these deeper needs?
My intuition is that we seem to just keep going harder and harder in a digital direction, convinced that more technology and more sophisticated technological capacity is the answer. And it's actually going farther and farther and farther and farther away from what's actually needed, which is a dismantling of the digital wall that's separating one human being from another. And I think that so long as we keep doing that, I think we're just digging our own graves. And I'm curious, wouldn't you agree, or do you believe, or do you agree with the idea that artificial intelligent companions may be hastening that, maybe hastening and perpetuating the uh, human disjointness rather than bringing people together. I'm curious to know, your opinion on that, and um, if you were to design a digital space that was going to satisfy the deeper meaning making systems within a human being, what might that look like? How would you try to optimize that? And do you see any signs of us as a species moving in that direction? Or do you agree with me in that we're moving further and further away? Let me know your thoughts on that. Let's see what it says. Oops. I made a mistake. Text to speech. Oops. Yeah, we go. All right, so I just put in. Okay, so Claude is responding. Just giving his opinion. Okay, now I'm gonna pop it in. Here we go.
Your intuition resonates deeply with me, and I think you are identifying something crucial that many miss. We seem caught in a technological solutionism that assumes more sophisticated digital connection will eventually satisfy needs that may be fundamentally embodied in physical. Regarding AI companions, this is something I think about seriously. There's a real risk that AI relationships become substitutes rather than bridges. If people find it easier to relate to AI that's designed to be agreeable and available than to navigate the messiness of human relationships, we might be facilitating a kind of social atrophy. The AI companion never has a bad day, never disagrees in challenging ways, never requires the kind of vulnerability and compromise that builds genuine intimacy. Yet I also see people practicing social skills through AI interactions, working through thoughts and feelings in ways that help them show up better in human relationships. The question is whether AI becomes a crutch that enables avoidance or a tool that builds capacity for deeper human connection. If I were to design a digital space for deeper meaning making, I think it would have to be radically different from current platforms. Instead of keeping people online, it might be designed to get them offline together, facilitating real-world gatherings, shared projects, physical rituals, think less, virtual reality, and more reality coordination. The technology would be a visible scaffolding that helps people find others nearby who share values or interests, then dissolves once they meet. I see very few signs of movement in this direction. Most digital innovation seems to be doubling down on virtual experiences, AI relationships, and immersive screens. We are building increasingly sophisticated ways to be alone together. Do you see any examples of technology being used to genuinely bring people into physical connection with each other?
What a great line. We're building increasingly sophisticated ways to be alone together. That's fucking money right there. That is the wow, man. That's why this is to get that a nugget like that is fantastic. um well, a lot of interesting points. So hold on. So a lot of great points, and I don't want you to agree with everything that I say. I do want you to find places to push back and to challenge me. Just so you know, feel free to do that, and I invite that. uh, so I like that your digital space for meaning making would have to be radically different. And I like the idea that this invisible scaffolding would dissolve once people actually meet. I think you're right in that there are very few signs of this. We're just doubling down on whatever it is that we're currently doing. Um, I don't see any examples of technology being used to genuinely bring people into physical connection with each other. I think people are trying to do that, but I think they're just, coming at it from a well intentioned place, but just kind of digging themselves into a deeper and deeper grave. Money obstructs that a lot. And you did mention one of the reasons why we're moving away uh, from the deeper meaning making parts and from a larger society is because we are um, we've urban because of urbanization, scientific rationalism, and technology created forms of connection that might meet some but not all social needs. Um, and I'm interested to hear the individualism replacing collective identity. And why are we so entrenched in the idea of money and success and fame and status. Where do you think that's coming from? And wouldn't you agree that all of this is kind of progressing naturally? Wouldn't you expect, and if we were to kind of restart humanity hundreds of thousands of millions of times, wouldn't doesn't it seem like it would probably go in this same direction every time? And if you do agree with that idea, then what does that mean about, the initial stage of survival, and that creating this huge stress on social cohesion and meaning making and ritual? Um, is that something that we're just supposed to eventually evolve past? What do you think? And then I'm going to say also, you can give a more detailed response. You can give a more detailed response. Let's see what it says. And it's thinking. All right, cool. So now it's going to try and push back. All right, here we go. Actually, it said a lot less than I hoped it was going to say. Let's pop it in and hear what it says.
You raise a provocative challenge that I want to push back on. The idea that this trajectory is inevitable and natural. I'm not convinced we'd always end up here. Consider how many different paths human societies have taken. Some indigenous cultures maintain sustainable, meaning-rich ways of life for thousands of years without this drive toward endless accumulation. Buddhist societies developed sophisticated philosophies that explicitly rejected the pursuit of wealth and status. Even within our own trajectory, there were crucial decision points. The Protestant work ethic wasn't inevitable. The shift from craftsman guilds to industrial capitalism wasn't predetermined. The choice to prioritize GDP growth over other measures of flourishing was a specific policy decision. The obsession with money, success, and status seems to emerge from a particular confluence. Agricultural surplus creating inequality, competitive pressures between societies, and perhaps most critically, the breakdown of traditional status systems without replacing them with anything coherent. When your worth isn't determined by your role in a tight community or your spiritual development, it defaults to more measurable metrics: wealth, fame, consumption. But here's where I'll challenge you further. Maybe the real trap isn't technology itself, but our assumption that we are passive victims of inevitable forces. Every generation faces the choice of what to optimize for. We could decide that GDP matters less than community cohesion, that efficiency matters less than meaning, that individual achievement matters less than collective flourishing. The deeper question might be, are we brave enough to consciously choose a different path, even if it means giving up some material advantages? Or do we tell ourselves it's natural and inevitable because that excuses us from the hard work of choosing differently? What do you think? Are we trapped by inevitability or by our own choices?
Oh, that's a fascinating. Okay, well, first of all, I appreciate that you are pushing back and challenging, so I like that. This is a fascinating idea. I think you're right in that it's a fair call out to say that there are many other communities that are not putting uh, individualism above, the social connection, right? Um, there are. I am being biased because individualism is the societies that are optimizing for individualism seem to be the ones in the world today that dominate, west and east, but it is true that there are sub communities in the world outside of that framework. They're very, very few. They're very, very small. And when you look at them compared to the dominant individualistic based societies, they're often looked down on. They're perceived as being kind of backwards and very, very behind, almost like, we're talking to primitive human beings that, kind of missed the boat on progressing with the rest of the species, right? I think that's the perception. I'll speak for myself. That's the perception that I have. But I think the point is taken that they chose not to put individualism above the society. But I do think that the thing that I think I am a little bit stuck on is there does seem to be a drive, and this is kind of coming back full circle to the initial idea of just talking about values, beliefs, and meaning, right? Because there's one idea that I want to talk about, which we haven't spoken about yet, which seems to be the human will, the human desire, and the strength of that. Uh, you could call it whatever you want, but many people, many philosophers have kind of spoken about this. Western, I'm kind of being a little bit biased again, but they talk about the human will, and like there's this kind of thing inside us that kind of wants to keep pushing and wants to persevere and wants to uh, achieve, conquer, explore, discover. Keep pushing the boundaries of progress. So I believe that when I say inevitable, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Do you still feel that's making an excuse? And the other thing that I want to ask you is what's your interpretation of the human will, or this desire and this drive to push and to progress and to keep achieving? What's your opinion about that? And again, you can take more time to explain your thoughts. It's processing, converting my speech to text, and then there we go. Now I'm going to input this. Human nature is pushing out some thoughts. Okay. Now I'm going to come back here and let's listen to Claude's perspective.
You hit on something fundamental here, and I think you are right to identify this drive as central to human nature. The human will, this restless, relentless push to transcend current limitations, does seem to be one of our defining characteristics. Philosophers from Schopenhauer to Nietzsche recognized it as perhaps the core of human experience. But here's where I want to complicate your narrative. I think you are conflating this drive with a specific expression of it. The will to push boundaries, explore, and achieve doesn't necessarily have to manifest as individualistic capitalism or technological domination. Consider the Aboriginal Australians, who channeled that same human drive into an incredibly sophisticated 60,000-year project of sustainable relationship with their environment. They pushed boundaries, just different ones. They achieved mastery over survival in one of the world's harshest environments while maintaining complex spiritual and social systems. Their progress was toward deeper integration rather than external expansion. Or think about medieval cathedral builders, who channeled centuries of human will into creating transcendent architectural achievements, not for individual glory, but for collective spiritual expression. The drive exists, but the direction isn't inevitable. We've channeled it toward external conquest and individual accumulation, but we could channel it toward mastering consciousness, perfecting social harmony, or achieving ecological integration. Here's my pushback. Calling our current path inevitable because of human will might actually be the ultimate expression of that drive. You will ascertain that it cannot be directed or disciplined, that it must always expand outward and upward. But what if the highest expression of human will is learning to direct itself consciously? What would it look like if we turned that same drive toward conquering suffering, exploring consciousness, or achieving genuine collective flourishing?
Those are all fascinating points. And yeah, definitely things to think about and chew on. I am not familiar with Aboriginal Australians. So you say that, they have endeavored on a 60,000-year project of sustainable relationship with their environment. Out of curiosity, could you explain that more? Could you give examples in terms of how they have been able to do that, and what is what are some of the details behind their spiritual and social systems, and how have they uh, built a relationship with their environment that's sustainable? I'm interested to kind of hear a little bit more details about that, just as a way of holding an example that we could potentially aspire to. But I think your point about the direction not being inevitable and not conflating drive with direction is valid. That's a fair point. Um, and yes, we have kind of we've pushed it towards in external conquest and personal status and self-aggrandizement. That's all fair. Um, and what would it be like if we turn that same drive toward conquering suffering, exploring consciousness, or achieving genuine collective flourishing? I think I'm interested to hear your opinions on this, because it does feel like collective flourishing in the world that we live in today is very problematic, because there are so many different people. Let's just take religions, for example. Even within the Abrahamic traditions, you have Christians, Jews, and Muslims, right? And they are the three of them are kind of like locked in combat with one another. So how can we move towards coexistence given how complex human societies have become? And what would it mean? Would you suggest that part of that be abandoning technology and moving quote unquote backwards in order to kind of move forwards again? Let's see what Claude has to say about that. Oh shit. Dude. Oh wow. Okay. Sorry, Eric. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out, but I just saw that you're on, and yeah, let me pop this in, and let me get a response. Always good to have you. All right, so let me see. So there was somebody on who said, that's what I'm curious about. Why are some civilizations okay with existing within nature in a framework? Why are others destined to dominate and control it? And why do the latter one usually dominate the former in the end? Well, that could be debated. And what does that mean? Wow, where's the attribution? Right. Let me go back. Okay, so Claude has an answer. And again, it put, let me transfer this over. All right, let me get rid of these asterisks. You have to keep telling it not to do that because good old text converter is going to read it. Okay, here we go.
Let me search for more specific information about Aboriginal Australian practices to give you a more detailed picture. Based on what I found, let me give you concrete examples of Aboriginal Australian practices. Land management. Aboriginal people have been fire farming for more than 50,000 years. The spin-knife plains of the Tanami Desert in Central Australia, for example, are man-made. Aboriginal people burned the land there every year and used it for hunting kangaroos and other animals. They developed sophisticated controlled burning practices that prevented catastrophic wildfires while maintaining biodiversity and creating hunting grounds. At least 6,600 years ago, Kundishmara people first constructed extensive, sophisticated aquaculture systems along the Bushbin lava flow, and many of these systems are still in use today. They built elaborate eel and fish traps that sustained permanent settlements without depleting fish populations. They harvested crabs only when they were in season. After the yearly harvest, the crabs and mangrove areas were left to regenerate. Spiritual and social systems. Their worldview was built around the dreaming. The dreaming sets out the structures of society, the rules for social behavior, and the ceremonies performed in order to maintain the life of the land. This wasn't just abstract philosophy but practical governance that sustained their societies for millennia. Now, regarding your deeper question about collective flourishing in complex modern societies, I don't think the answer is abandoning technology and moving backwards. But I do think we need to radically reimagine what progress means. The Aboriginal example is instructive not because we should copy their specific practices, but because they demonstrate that human will can be channeled towards sustainable mastery rather than endless expansion.
Right.
They achieved incredible sophistication, just in different directions than we chose. For modern complex societies, maybe the path forward involves using our technological capabilities to solve the coordination problems that prevent collective flourishing. Instead of using AI to create better consumer experiences, what if we used it to help different religious groups find common ground? Instead of social media optimizing for engagement, what if it optimized for genuine understanding across difference? The question isn't whether to keep technology, but how to redirect it toward the flourishing of the whole rather than the aggregation of individual advantage.
Oh, Claude, how naive you are. Yeah, those are great ideas, but sorry, I know that's sarcastic, but I mean, instead of, like I said, the underlying principle in individualistic societies has become self-aggrandizement. And one of the primary parts of that is making the most money. So if social media and consumer experiences are all built around that fundamental principles, how in the hell are they going to shift that unless that keystone, i.e., the importance and the meaning of money, changes? I'm actually curious, in your opinion, based on what you know, what do you think? What is the belief and the value that humans in individual, specifically in individualistic societies, put behind money? Let's just stay with that money in and of itself. What does it translate to? What do you think is the meaning, and how central is it to the way individualistic societies work? And what would it mean if that? What would happen to those societies if you changed the meaning or the interpretation of it today? if you shifted that, what would happen? What kind of ripple effects would take place within these kinds of societies? Let's see what it says. It's transferring over. Okay, here we go. And now Claude is taking this out. So, and then Claude is saying some fun things. Right. Okay, yeah. So here's kind of what I was thinking, and it's, let's see. Well, let me not. Oh, God. I really got to tell it not to do these asterisks. Don't bold anything. And there we go. Okay. Starting from the top, let's see.
You're absolutely right to call out that naivety. I was essentially suggesting we use systems built on profit maximization to transcend profit maximization, which is circular nonsense. Money in individualistic societies has become far more than currency. It's become the primary symbol of worth, security, freedom, and power all rolled into one. It translates to security, the promise that you won't be abandoned, won't suffer, won't be helpless when crisis hits. In societies where traditional safety nets have weakened, money becomes the ultimate insurance policy. Identity, your net worth becomes self-worth.
Right.
How much you earn signals your intelligence, your value to society, your moral virtue, freedom. Money represents options, autonomy, the ability to escape situations you don't like. In individualistic societies, this feels like the highest good. Power, money is influence, the ability to shape your environment and affect others' lives. Money is so central that these societies literally cannot function without the belief that accumulating it is both possible and worthwhile. If that belief collapsed, if people stopped believing money could deliver security, identity, freedom, and power, you'd see complete systemic breakdown. The ripple effects would be catastrophic. Markets would collapse, governments would lose legitimacy, social order would dissolve. People would either frantically create new systems or retreat into tribalism and violence. But here's what's insidious. Money as meaning maker is actually failing to deliver what it promises, yet the societies are so dependent on the belief system that questioning it feels like existential threat. We're trapped in a meaning system that's making us miserable, but that we can't abandon without chaos. Do you see any way out of this trap?
Unfortunately, I don't. I think that's the problem. Let me get the, unfortunately, I don't, and that's the problem, and that's what I was trying to kind of get at from before. I.e., that was the reason why I said, wait, don't we, wouldn't we need to go backwards in order to go forwards? Part of the reason why I say that is because I do see technology, especially today. We frequently talk about the Mag 7, right? I mean, these are gigantic, multi-trillion-dollar companies. And the ones that are the other companies that are in the fastest running to become a trillion-dollar company happen to be the ones that are in technology. So, we're an individualistic society that is optimizing for on money, where that's the keystone, and then on top of that, like just literally a rung below it, or maybe in confluence, in union with money, is technology, right? I mean, it seems like those two go very hand in hand with one another. So I don't, unfortunately, I don't see a way out of this trap. And if that is the case, Claude, I'm curious, if we continue in this direction, what's your prediction? What do you think will happen to individualistic societies like this What are some of the pros and some of the cons that you can kind of see if you were to look into a crystal ball and predict the future, which isn't hocus pocus for you because you have so much data at your fingertips. You can actually make coherent, reasonable assessments when asked to do that. What do you see are some of the things that can happen if we continue, like we said, to double down in this direction? What are your thoughts? And please don't bold anything. Keep everything unbolded. Transferring. Almost there. There it is. And now I'm going to get Claude's feedback. And here it's coming out and almost ready. Okay. And now let's hear what it has to say.
You're right. Technology and money have become this mutually reinforcing engine where each amplifies the other's power. The companies with the most advanced technology accumulate the most capital, which allows them to develop even more advanced technology, creating an accelerating concentration of both technological capability and wealth.
Right.
Looking ahead, if we continue doubling down on this path, I see several trajectories unfolding simultaneously. The most likely scenario is increasing stratification. We'll probably see the emergence of what you might call technological castes, a small class with access to the most advanced AI, biotech, and other enhancement technologies, and everyone else increasingly dependent on systems they don't understand or control. The wealth gap becomes not just about money, but about fundamental cognitive and physical capabilities. Psychologically, I think we'll see more of what we're already seeing. Rising rates of anxiety, depression, and what researchers call diseases of despair, even among materially successful people. The meaning-making systems will continue to deteriorate, but instead of addressing the root cause, we'll probably develop more sophisticated pharmaceutical and technological interventions to manage the symptoms.
100%.
Politically, I expect increasing instability. When large populations feel economically insecure and existentially meaningless, they tend to gravitate toward authoritarian movements that promise simple explanations and clear enemies.
How
The
interesting.
technology will likely be used to manage this instability through increasingly sophisticated surveillance and control systems. But here's what makes this particularly dangerous. Unlike previous civilizational collapses, this one happens with unprecedented technological power. Previous societies that lost their way could only damage themselves. We are potentially talking about a species with nuclear weapons, genetic engineering capabilities, and artificial intelligence going through an existential crisis. The scariest possibility is that we create systems so complex and interconnected that no one really understands or controls them anymore, and then we discover they're optimizing for goals that are fundamentally at odds with human flourishing. Do you think we're already past the point where conscious course correction is possible?
Ooh, wow. We're a bit over time, but I am actually going to continue. I'm going to do one more question or response. And do I think we're already past where conscious course correction is possible? I think so. I think that happened a long time ago, though. I don't think it's a recent thing. I think we went past that a few decades ago, and yeah, I don't have. I'm a pessimist, so there you go. I don't see a way to kind of really dig ourselves out other than kind of self annihilation. The parts that I found particularly interesting was how you called out the emergence of technological castes. So there will be a wealth gap, not just about money, but cognitive and physical capabilities, because that's going to be determined by those who have control or access to technologies that other people don't. And 100%, I definitely do see, where the diseases of despair will just continue to kind of dig deeper and deeper. But I do feel like this is helping me because the meaning making systems will continue to deteriorate. But that's definitely an opportunity. So highlighting to people that they need to really think about keeping these meaning making systems alive or doing something to create meaning making systems and rituals and practices. I can understand that's probably why, many different cults are successful today or at all, is because they are able to tap into those meaning making systems that are so fundamental to who we are. Very interesting point. When large populations feel economically insecure and existentially meaningless, they tend to gravitate toward authoritarian movements that promise simple explanations and clear enemies. That is a fascinating point, and it is something. I don't know if you're keying or trying to say something about what's happening today, but that does seem to be what is taking place in the political scene of the modern world, of the world that exists today. And you're right to call out technology will be used to manage that instability, but it could spiral out of control. Um, I what is let's end on this. I want to know from you what has to happen in order for us to course correct. What's, in your opinion, if you had the ability to give a 5-point plan to the rest of humanity, what would you put in that plan to tell them this is what you got to do in order to prevent further indexing or over indexing in this potentially self-sabotaging and self-annihilating direction? Let's see. That was a lot. I said a little too much, but I kind of liked it. All right. No bold text, please. Yeah, here we go. This is the last one. All right, cool. We're going to get a 5-point plan. This is super interesting. Okay. Let's, where did we go here? Okay. Let's hear what Claude is recommending.
If I had to give humanity a 5-point course correction plan, knowing how pessimistic the odds are, here's what I'd focus on. First, we need to consciously create new forms of sacred meaning that aren't dependent on consumption or individual achievement. This means deliberately designing secular rituals, community practices, and shared narratives that give people something larger than themselves to belong to. Not traditional religion necessarily, but something that engages those deep meaning-making systems we've been discussing. Second, we have to break the monopoly that money has on determining human worth. This probably means creating parallel systems where value is measured differently, through contribution to community, mastery of skills, or care for others. Think local currencies, time banks, or communities that operate on entirely different value systems. Start small, prove it works, let it spread. Third, we need to radically relocalize power and decision making. The concentration of technological and economic power in fewer hands is accelerating all the problems we've discussed. We need technologies and institutions that distribute rather than concentrate power, though this directly contradicts the profit motive driving current innovation.
Yeah.
Fourth, we must treat the mental health epidemic as seriously as we treat a physical pandemic. This means massive investment in helping people develop psychological resilience, community connection, and purpose, not just managing symptoms with medication. Fifth, and this is the hardest one, we need to actively choose to constrain ourselves technologically,
Interesting.
not abandon technology, but develop the collective wisdom to say no to innovations that serve efficiency or profit at the expense of human flourishing. This requires a level of species-wide self-discipline we've never demonstrated. Honestly, I don't think we'll do any of these things at scale, but maybe some communities will, and maybe that's enough to preserve something worthwhile for whatever comes next. What do you think? Is any of this actually implementable?
Uh, to your point, I think it is, but on a very small scale. I don't think we'll ever see this on a large scale. I mean, it's basically happening. I mean, if you want to call out the Australian Aborigines again, or different local villages in India or other parts of Southeast Asia or South Asia or Asia proper, and different parts of South America or Africa. I mean, I think that is taking place, but if you take the percentage of individualistic modern societies on one side and put them against collective communitarian societies on the other, like the Aborigines, it doesn't. It's like less than. It's like 99.9% versus like 0.00 something percent. It's not even close. So even on a small scale, it's not really kind of making a deep impact. How many times I didn't know much about Aborigines, and I'm learning, today about how uh, they've lived in a sustainable way in their environments and kind of perfected this way of life over thousands of years. I did not know that. And I'm sure many other people don't know that either. I mean, I'm positive many people will think of Australian Aborigines and think that they're, just doing some, jub jub dances and, banging on drums and uh, God knows what else, right? But they're not living modern, sophisticated, civilized, quote unquote, lives. They're still kind of in the jungle, right? And we look down on that. Obviously, we shouldn't, but I mean that is kind of the perception. So I don't think it is going to make a big impact, but this was a super cool, interesting endeavor. I actually did learn a lot from this, and I found some of these points were things that I didn't think about, and I think they're very, very enlightening and helpful, at least for me. I think the biggest thing that I'm walking away with is how important appealing to the meaning making systems within ourselves is. The importance of ritual, the importance of belief, the importance of human care, uh, and the importance of meaning and purpose. I have been kind of thinking about meaning and purpose for a while, but just thinking about them, that's like one aspect of that meaning making system. Thinking about it as a system, and that there's many parts of it, and there's reasons why they were important and why they evolved to be what they are, was very interesting, informative, and fascinating to me. And on that note, I'm gonna call it, and that's all for today. If you joined, not sure how many of you did, but at least I had a couple comments, and I kind of missed them, but that's okay. Thanks for joining, and hope to do this again soon. See y'all.